Welcome back to the Buffalo Reformed Podcast. We are a collective of Reformed Christians who meet monthly to discuss theology, culture, politics, and education. I'm your host, Aaron Masters. I'm a pastor at Covenant Reformed Church in Western New York. This podcast exists to connect and encourage like-minded brothers and sisters in Western New York as we work to see this region won for Christ. We encourage our listeners to seek this goal by being devoted to Christ, to their family, to their community, and to their local church. In this episode, I am joined by Dr. David Erb. Dr. Erb is the director of the Conservatory of Music and Fellow of Music at New St. Andrews College in Moscow, Idaho. He holds a Doctor of Musical Arts in Choral Conducting from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and a Master of Music from Westminster Choir College. A veteran educator who previously taught at Lawrence University and Bucknell University, Dr. Erb is the composer and editor of Cantica Sanctorum, a collection of psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. He also co-founded Praetorius Publications and the Chenanaya Summer Music Institute, dedicated to equipping churches and schools with robust, scripture-saturated musical resources. On this episode of the Buffalo Reformed Podcast, recorded live at the Fight Laugh Feast Conference, we sat down with Dr. Erb to discuss the vital task of rebuilding musical literacy in the church. Dr. Erb shares his journey to New St. Andrews College and explains how the Kodai method, sound before symbol, can transform how congregations learn to sing. From overcoming cultural musical illiteracy to practical advice for small churches seeking to build, Dr. Erb offers a roadmap for cultivating robust, literate worship. We also explore his Cantica Sanctorum psalm settings, which are a group of 50 psalm settings taken directly from Scripture, a vital resource for getting more familiar with the Psalms. As always, we hope you enjoy this episode of the Buffalo Reformed Podcast. Welcome back to the Buffalo Reformed Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Masters. We're here in Nashville on the eve of the Fight Laugh Feast Conference, and I'm joined today by Dr. David Erb. Dr. Erb, thank you for coming on the show with me.
Thanks for having me.
So, by way of introduction, we usually have our guests give a brief bio just to introduce to our listeners who you are. So, if you would tell us a little bit about yourself, where you came from, what you studied.
Yeah, maybe working backwards, I've been in Moscow, Idaho for the last 17 years. I'm the director of the Conservatory of Music at New St. Andrews College, and I have a community organization, Collegium Musica Moscow, Canis Firmus Chorale, that I direct. Used to do music at Christ Church for 11 years, but it's been a number of years now that I've just focused on the college side of things. And walking back from there, I'd been at a CREC church, ACCS school in Seattle before we came to Moscow. So it's been, well, since I got married 23 plus years ago, that I've been in the ACCS, CREC world and doing things in that pasture, if you will. Yes. Prior to that, I was teaching at Lawrence University, kind of in the secular, private music world, conducting, teaching music, come up through all the degree training. Did Madison, Wisconsin for my undergrad and my doctorate, with Westminster Choir College sandwiched in the middle there, with various teaching in between degrees, which was great just to provide practical learning as opposed to just degree. Yes.
How did you get connected with the Moscow?
My wife became Reformed as her pastor at that point became Reformed as Doug became Reformed. And so when I reached out and started courting my wife long distance, we got in touch again with that pastor who is now, he was one of the first Greyfriars students, and he was at the church out in Seattle. And so in the process of courting, getting married, I left teaching at Lawrence University in Wisconsin, and the church in Seattle was looking for its first full-time church musician. There wasn't a program, there wasn't a built-up choir or a program, so to speak, to walk into. It was build it. They wanted more training, yes. And their pastor had done a year of music, I think, early in his college life, but couldn't do any more, and so I kind of pivoted. But I wasn't Reformed at that time. I became Reformed in the process of courting my wife, who was Reformed, and people would give me books and say, read this. And so I did, and read them and said, okay, I guess I agree with that. I guess I'm Reformed.
Wow. Yeah, because I was very interested in knowing that too, how the theology changed and intersected with your music career. And so you were courting your wife, you were becoming Reformed, you stepped into this role as a church music director, would that be fair? But then you had to really build it from the ground up. It wasn't just an established program that you were stepping into.
Yeah, and I didn't have to when they hired me, but they said if you want, you can teach at the ACCS school that had a lot of crossover. Yes. There wasn't much of a music program there either, so that was also build it up. And it was the nice thing about both of those at that point, I mean, it can be glorious to walk into something that's robust and mature, but it was build from scratch, what should we do, and a desire to be led, yes. And to support things. So, the growing pains of building something, but the beauty of it being built the way you want to build it, rather than having to triage and reteach or yes. those kind of things.
I definitely want to ask you about some of that, because we're trying to build something where we are now, and so getting your experiences and then your recommendations for us is going to be crucial. But before we do that, and just so that the listeners kind of understand and can have a context for what you're dealing with, what is it exactly that you are trained in, and what's your day-to-day look like as far as how you do music and operate?
Yeah, so I grew up doing music. I was in choirs and piano and band, but I always knew I wanted to be a choir director. And so my undergrad's in choral music education, my master's and my doctorate are in conducting. It's the only job I've ever had is conducting in some capacity. I've not worked at McDonald's or any other kind of job. Yes. And so, yeah, I teach music. I do admin kind of things, but I'm a choir director. That's kind of what I've been geared towards my entire life, and the thrust of what I do and what I delight in most in the musical world. And so at NSA, I teach oral skills, teaching kids in tandem with the music theory. Well, I have taught music theory, music history, oral skills, vocal technique, lots of different things. But right now I'm teaching oral skills, which is the learning to hear music and understand it, learning to decipher the symbols and be able to read it by thinking it, hearing it with your voice, not a piano to read it or another instrument to read it. And some other electives, and then I direct a number of choirs as well. And both there and outreach stuff that we do. We'll talk later, I imagine, about the Kodai stuff. Yes. But so that's summer work. But so yeah, as being a choir director, there's a lot of, like any job, there's admin kind of things you have to do. You have to prepare for concerts, which means we don't have our own venue that's big enough to hold us. So finding venues, we're not a big music school, so we don't have all the players in-house. So finding players when needed for larger works, planning the calendar. There's all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Musically, it's choosing the literature for your choirs, thinking about different kinds of concerts, whether it's a seasonal like Christmas, spring concerts, other events, and I'm probably an obsessive compulsive. Is that what you call that when it comes to programming? I'm very detailed in it. It's not just a theme. I tend to program in chiasm as my main structure.
That's awesome.
So it's not just a collection of pieces associated around a scripture or an idea, although it can be. But so it's an assembling. I do that because the way I think about concerts is a rhetorical event that you're sharing with the people. It'd be like reading a book. It's not just a collection of thoughts you're organizing in different ways. And so as things are organized, a chiasm will have a point in the middle, and there's things that reflect one another. And the fact that they're reflected either in the same text set differently or related a textual idea or something like that, even if the audience doesn't get that, I think helps it to settle in them and communicate more richly than just there's another nice piece, there's another nice piece, there's another nice piece, and we clap every song or every 3 songs. It's not, for me, it's not entertainment. I mean, I get how it gets under that umbrella, but I will often say to my audiences, we are not here to entertain you, we are here that you entertain us, in the other sense of the word.
Yes, exactly.
And so programming takes a lot of time to try to get things to fit structurally, thematically, to fit your ensembles, to fit the time frame you need, sometimes to fit your audience. No, I don't think my audience is ready for that. Maybe I ought not do that. So, and then I mean, I haven't even gotten yet to having a choir rehearsal or conducting. So, you know, anything one does as a musician, you get trained as a musician. You ought to be. Sadly, that's not always the case. People get trained as a pianist, as a cellist, as a violinist. And of course, you can be trained well as a musician along the way, but there are a lot of people who play well, but they're really not very good musicians, or they sing well. You know, that's the particular joke, is singers are not musicians.
I make fun of my wife for that all the time.
So, but you get trained as a musician. There's musicianship skills, the ability to understand music, read it, analyze it. And, you know, as a lit teacher doesn't just read the book and has a students, he's diving deep into it and understanding things both in that book that a typical reader would not get because of his training, and then breadth of knowledge from styles and genres and other works by that author. So you're studying the work, so you really know it, you've digested it, and then you, as a conductor, of course, you really have to be, you have to be trained to move your hands to communicate to your singers, your instrumentalists. So there's the technique, the art of just conducting, but you know, the bulk of it is training the ensemble, and depending on the skill level of your group, that can be. Your singers, instrumentalists come in knowing their music, and you work to put it together, work out the rough spots, get it under one vision, your vision as a conductor, so it sounds good. And then there's groups that don't read music at all and aren't very good singers, and there's a lot more work. You're being a voice teacher, you're being a music teacher, and you have to lead them by the hand to get them to be able to do a piece. You know, hopefully you're working to train them up as musicians as best you can, but that's harder to do in a choir of 60 or 80 than a small group where it's a class. They're different things, but you do your best. So yeah, you're molding that and trying to get all those people to sound, to be able to sing. Well, I'm trying to get them to sing skillfully as they can, and to be able to sing and communicate rhetorically when they're singing, not just sing nicely or beautifully, but to sing with understanding, as the Bible puts it, both textually and musically, and how those things wed together. And that's what you're doing when you're performing. You're trying to communicate rhetorically about whatever it is you're singing about or playing. You know, playing doesn't have a text, but can still be communicating. And one of the things I often say is, you play piano, you can practice all day long on the piano to get better at your craft, and that instrument, might need tuning once in a while or a string being fixed, but it's there, it'll do what you want as best as your skills get. When you're a choir director, you can't go in the practice room and practice on 40 people or 80 people. They're not there for you to learn the skills of working. And, generally speaking, every time you go to that piano, it's in tune and it doesn't have an attitude, right? It didn't have a bad day. Well, you can have 60 to 80 people and a whole bunch of them just had a bad day, or they just had a test, or they're tired, or the weather changed, there's so much that goes, but that's my instrument. My instrument is people, which is glorious. I love that. But it has its downsides on a whole bunch of fronts, from learning how to do it to learning how to do it well.
And I've never heard that definition before, but really, as a choral conductor, your instrument is the people. And so you're learning how to play that instrument skillfully. But then bringing that whole body into one unified whole so that they can communicate something to the audience, that's a challenge. That is a big challenge. So it sounds like you've done this with all ranges of people, from skilled people who already have a lot of training to people who have zero. What would you say is the most challenging aspect of what you do generally?
It's really the non-musical stuff. It's getting venues, getting players, getting the schedule to work out, because you're dependent on so many different other people, organizations to fall in line, and that's probably the most trying thing. I mean, doing the work of trying to get people, whether it's an intensive 1-week music camp or 3 months to get a concert ready or whatever. I mean, there's that kind of work, but that's what I do. It has its bumps. Like I say, you have people that they're not prepared like they're supposed. They're supposed to be prepared on this. They're not. Okay, that just set us way behind. But
So the admin stuff, I think that's probably true for most musicians, right? If they could just do the music the whole time, they'd be happy. So it's interesting, you used a phrase about the choir singing rhetorically. And that, I think, maybe could bridge us into the Kodai way of thinking about music. And so then maybe we can talk about this a little bit in preparation for talking about how you approached building up a music community. But there was a video that was going around that NSA shared, and you were giving an introduction to the Kodai way of method, the Kodai method. And you were describing how he was noticing these musicians who were really good button pushers. They could play the instrument, but they weren't really good musicians. And so he was trying to solve that problem. And I identified with that a little too much, I think, because I had that experience where I was able to play elaborate music, and I could do it pretty well. But then whenever I went to audition for assistantships at some of the high-level schools, some of the things that they required for that, I was just not prepared to do. So in some of the oral skills, analysis, a lot of that stuff. What was his solution to that problem, and maybe what are some of the things that you've taken away from him that you are then applying?
Kind of seeing the situation you just narrated made him think, okay, so how do you change that? How do you get these high-level pianists coming in the conservatory at the college level to be musically literate, to be musicians, not just button pushers, not just a pianist? And as he assembled thoughts and ideas and tools, the tools aren't unique to him. He didn't come up with solfege or hand signs or rhythm syllables, but assembles them and starts thinking about a sequence from young children, age 5, generally to start. How do they learn it? And I think the biggest difference in his method of teaching music, it's similar to the Suzuki method instrumentally, but it's a sound before symbol approach, and I describe it as a linguistic approach to teaching music. So when we teach our kids English or somebody else another language, they've been hearing that language since they've been in the womb. They've been hearing it now for 4 or 5 years. They can they understand a lot of vocabulary. They could define it if they had that cognitive ability, but they know what things mean.
Yes.
They know how to conjugate verbs to match the subject.
Yes.
But they can't label any of it. They don't know what things are called. They don't recognize the letters yet. But they're partially literate in the language, right, from a spoken,
Yes.
oral perspective. So then, when you start teaching reading and writing, you're extracting things that they already know. It's in there already. It's not like you've got kids that have been in an English-speaking home for 5 years, and then you start teaching them Russian,
Right. Yes.
or Greek, or different language, different alphabet, different sounds,
Right.
and and so with the Kodai, it used to be that kids sang all the time. So on the playground in their homes, that was part of play. You didn't have to teach them all these songs. They learned them because they had older brothers and sisters, and that's what they did. Now you have to teach them most of these songs, unless they have older children who have gone through a Kodai program. But if the kid, they just play games, is what it is at the young. Rain, rain, go away. And there's often circle games or dances or different things that go with them.
Yes.
And they're just having fun. They're singing. Well, around the world, generally speaking, the most common first sounds that kids make in singing is da, 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 so, mi, not do, re, mi, fa. They don't sing songs that are do, re, mi, fa, so. And so they sing that song, and then they're trained to think and analyze what they're doing. So they'd first learn extremes, high, low, not particular pitches, but they need to be able to hear that's a high sound, that's a low sound, and give it a category and a comparative. Then you have fast and slow and different things like that. And then you get narrowing it down. They learn what a beat is, and then they learn the difference between beat and rhythm, and you're analyzing how many sounds were on a beat. Ba, 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 ba. How many beats? There were 4. Which one was different? The third one. How is it different? There were 2 sounds, not one. And were they even? Were they uneven? They're learning to think.
Yes.
And then it gets named. Okay, you know what it is. You can do it. You can perform it. Here's what we call that. Same thing with pitch. Ba, 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 ba. How many different tones were there, or sounds? There were 2. One was high, one was low. So they can maybe just show high and low, and then we say, we're going to call the high one so and the low one mi. We name them, and then you represent them on the board. Then they can start reading other patterns in that set.
Yes.
So
you're drawing it out of them.
Yep. The cycle is prepare. So you're preparing what you're going to pull out, and then present this new idea, and then practice it. And then, so you've got that going through all these, different layers, the different things you're teaching over a year, over 6 years throughout the curriculum, so that they can open up. If it's done well with a good teacher with adequate time to teach, by the time they're in 6th grade, you should be able to hand them a Palestrina motet and ask them to sing one of the parts.
Yes. Wow.
If it's being taught well.
Yes.
And that, so you get, if I say that, you understand, wow, that would be crazy.
Right.
Well, you don't think it's crazy that your 6th grade, I don't know if you have a 6th grade child.
No, my oldest son's 6.
Okay, well, but when he becomes 13,
Yeah.
that it's going to be that big a deal that he could read a passage from Shakespeare or
Right.
the Bible,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But 500 years ago, that would have been astounding.
Yes, that's true. Yes.
My 12-year-old son's going to read the Bible, Shakespeare, whatever it might happen to be.
Yes.
Why would he do that to begin with?
Yes.
And that would be amazing, if they valued it.
You're talking about a lot of these things that my wife and I have discussed this a lot, because this is a big problem in our culture, it seems like, even having gone through music school, and my wife and I both. The level of literacy that's expected with regards to music across the board is not very high. So, and even for people that have degrees that are coming out of music school, they don't really have that understanding, so that they can pick up a piece of music like that and understand what's happening there. So this would be the next question: like, how do you fix that? And so if we're building a community of people that we want the sixth grader to be able to pick up Palestrina and be able to sing that, where do you even start?
Yeah, I hate that question. it's not really, I mean, it's easy in the abstract, it's not easy in the real world, where we are culturally.
Yeah.
Well, the talk I'm going to give tomorrow at the conference is on literacy, the need for literacy to be what we're aiming at. And you know, in a church or a school community, the people that are in charge, the headmaster, the school board, the pastor, the session, they need to get that principally. They might not understand what they mean by it even, but they need to get that that's important and we need to be endeavoring to do that. And I've been there and done that a number of times, and you can get bumps because then as a musician you come in and say, okay, I can do that. And they're like, wait, that's not what we meant. Right. Yeah, well, you didn't know what you meant, and this is what it is. Yes. But so there's all of that. But you know, you can have a music guy that gets that wants to do it, and if the leadership doesn't want to provide the adequate time at the school or any venue in the church life to grow in that, it's going to be hard for you to make much headway. I mean, it's not that you can't do anything. Right. You know, right. Kelvin wanted, as I understand it, Kelvin wanted weekly communion and didn't get it because the session, the leadership wasn't ready to do that. You keep working towards things and trying, but you know.
So you have to have a shared vision with the leadership.
You have to have yeah, that's perfectly said. You need to have the vision, and then you know, in Hungary. So could I put this idea together? Mm-hmm. Well, it's an idea. It's not affecting anybody. It's not changing anything, and Hungary had a state school system, and so he needed their approval. To try this different kind of curriculum in a school. Eventually, it was approved, and they tried it in one school with a skillfully trained teacher in this way of teaching. Okay. You know, and you couldn't go watch other people because it's fresh, but someone that gets it, and well, the results start to become pretty amazing. And so then they start putting it in other schools as teachers were skillfully trained to do it, which is very un-American. Yes. Americans want something in a box that anybody can do. Anyone who played piano for 6 years, they can do this, right? Education in a box. It's not education in a box. So skillful teachers, and within a generation, the description you read about the transformation of Hungary as a nation, not just school kids. There are like 800 radio level choirs that grew up throughout the country, and 4 professional orchestras. You know, Hungary's about the size of Indiana, but at that point, I think 10 million people, if I remember the narrative right. Yeah. And basically, it became, if you weren't musically literate, as you and I understand musical literacy, you weren't a literate citizen.
Yes, interesting.
And so that's one generation, but it's the support of the structure, the leadership, and it's having skillful teachers, knowing how to do it, and the time and setup to do it. That's easier in a day school. Yes. So I know you said you're starting homeschooling. We homeschooled our kids. Mm-hmm. My wife and I are both day school people all our lives. I still am. Yeah. But a homeschool setup's harder to do that in. You don't have daily classes, and you don't always have things that are just ability level. You have wider groups of people, and that works for some things and not so well for others. But anyway, so you need the vision, you need a skillful teacher, and you need the structure to do it, and then of course the buy-in from people. So you know, in Moscow we started a Schola Cantorum, a singing school, where we teach it. And when we started, it was broader. Logos hadn't developed a program yet to do this, and so you had a lot of Logos kids and homeschool, which there weren't as many homeschoolers back then. But Logos, we developed a program at Logos that does Kodály teaching, so this program became irrelevant to them or redundant. And it's in a trough right now. It exists, but as we've had lots of new people move into town, they don't know what it is or why they need it or whatnot, and we don't have people flowing to it. It exists, but it's feeble right now as far as the number of families participating. So you need that too. You can have a vision. You can even have the teacher. You can have the classes set up, and people have to come.
Right.
You know, if it's a day school, you don't have a choice. If it's not a day school, if it's a church thing or a homeschool thing, it's different. So again, circumstances play a part in how do you make it work, and there's not an easy one size fits all. You know, what I would say is, you know, if you can get someone who then musically can do it. So we named our summer training course where we train the certification for Kodály, Chenaniah Summer Music Institute. And Chenaniah was the leader of the Levites in charge of all the musicians because he was skillful, is how the Bible says it. And so we're trying to train up. So if you have a Chenaniah-like teacher or chief musician in the church that is equipped to do it, has a passion for it, and doesn't have to work 3 jobs on the side kind of thing to earn ends meet, well, then I'd, you know, go labor, till. You know, sometimes, you know, a lot of what I've done is I've come into this. There's various levels. There's stuff I do at a high level, and there's stuff over the years that I would say what I was doing there at that point was tilling up the ground. You know, faithful people, wonderful people, but not ready for all the things that I would want to do with them. Yes. So I'm just tilling up the soil, trying to get it ready to plant the seeds and hope that it would take root later. And I may not get to be the one that
benefits from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might be the next
or harvest
generation.
it.
Yeah, right.
So that's why I don't like that question, because it's not a helpful answer really. But it is. You have to have a Chenaniah-like teacher, and you have to have the support that says we want you to do this, and try to equip that person to do it, and encourage people to partake of it. You can't, you know, particularly in a church setting, you can't require them to come to Wednesday night singing school or the Sunday school. But you can teach on it and preach on it, and then provide it and start doing things. And you know, you're praying that God would prosper the work of your hands as you do stuff, that you get more people to come, and if you're able to get them to sing better than they ought to, which is, you know, a good pianist can make a piano sound better than it ought to. Right. But that's not as hard as getting a bunch of people who don't sing well or aren't musically literate to sound, you know, you couldn't do that with a bunch of violinists. You can't take a bunch of people who've never played the violin or the cello and have them sit down together and make them sound a lot better than they are. You can't. Right. You can kind of do that with singers up to a point. Yes. And I'm thankful for that. But you start doing that, and then people are drawn to it. I like that. Or someone else will say, "Oh, you gotta have your kids going to choir. My kids just love it." Your kids love choir? Yeah, they like. Or you know, I started these music camps back in Seattle in 2009 was when I started it, and I do one in Moscow. I do one in Louisiana as well, and the one in Moscow is, I don't know, 480 kids, K-12. It's a week-long intensive. Yeah. It's like music camp meets VBS in a Reformed context. There's nothing gimmicky or goofy about it. Yeah. It's intense, and we do classical music, and we do it in a week. Wow. But you know, you have kids who have come to that, and probably when they started weren't maybe that interested in music, and then they love it. And particularly for people who are maybe coming from outside Moscow that don't have as many other opportunities musically, it's like they've been brought to the oasis, and that's the first thing they want on the calendar. It's like the highlight of their year is to go to music camp, and they do dancing, and it's not just fun. They're not, you know, it's not VBS, and so you do it well, and people are attracted to it, and you pray that God would keep growing it.
My wife and I both had experiences at music camps or things like that growing up, and I know for her they were really, she loved them. So it is true, whenever they're done well, they can be wonderful experiences. Maybe this question, though, will help that last question be a little bit more practical if I ask it this way. So our little community, we have 32 members in our church. It's a little mission church. The membership ranges from 2 months old all the way up into the 70s. And all the spectrum of people who have musical understanding from 0 to doctorate level. So we're looking across the nation at Moscow, and we're seeing what has been done over the last 40 years of ministry. And we're wondering, how do you get from point A to point B? So just say that you were transplanted over to Buffalo, and we said, similarly to what you experienced in the church that you took, you have free reign. You can do with this whatever you think needs to be done. What would you do?
Yeah, the number one thing is you got to start building up teaching the kids, and you don't have a lot of them at this point, and maybe there aren't many that are older than 8. I don't know, but you probably have smatterings. But again, that's difficult. But you're setting up a system and a mentality of, we need to train the kids so the next generation has this coming up.
Yes.
I don't expect the 70-year-old to become musically literate. He could. I mean, I was visiting my dad years ago when he was in rehab, and there was a guy who was in his 80s, and he was in a wheelchair bound, but still his mind was, and he would go over to the piano, and he found some little piano book, and he was teaching himself to play piano. At 80, wheelchair bound in a nursing home. Yeah. You can still learn things. I get it if you decide not to start learning Latin or Hebrew or Greek or music literacy later in life, and you're working, and it's you can't recover all the things you didn't get when you're growing up.
Yes.
So, and everyone's gotten this throughout the history of the world. Pretty much is you have to train the kids up. So you want to be casting the vision and teaching as you're able with the older, knowing you're not going to make as much headway there. Not just with 70-year-olds, the 26-year-old who's got 3 kids already and he's working. I mean, he's not going to be able to do it probably in the same way. But you're encouraging them, and adults, it doesn't happen very often, but I'm always really encouraged when I hear of a 63-year-old who's picked the flute back up or is taking cello lessons for the first time and they've never taken lessons at age 40 or whatever it is. There's this law in our this unwritten law that says once you graduate from high school, you may never take another music lesson again as long as you live, unless you're a vocational musician.
Right. Yes.
I mean, it's just like, that's it. You will never take a lesson again.
That's right.
And that's so sad.
It is very sad.
So, but yeah, focusing on the kids, and it sounds like at the size you're at, it's not going to be as robust to start. You're working on congregational. I mean, part of literacy, and Kadai talked about this, was so you had these pianists from Hungary who knew Rachmaninoff, who knew Beethoven, who knew Chopin, but they didn't know the music of their people. They didn't know Hungarian folk music, the stuff that's theirs, and of course there is music that grows out of that, classical music that grows out of that folk tradition, but primarily just the folk tradition, and that's lost in America too. The number of kids who know absolutely no song, whether they're coming, I'm getting kids who come from Christian day schools or Christian homeschoolers, but I don't expect it would be a lot different in public school. They don't know My Country 'Tis of Thee. They don't know the patriotic or the folk heritage of music in our country, which is a melting pot, to be sure, but there is a heritage there that's American folk music, and they don't know that. And then there's the hymnody side of that and the psalms side of that, and there are different streams of that. So a lot of people talk about traditional hymnody, and they mean like songs from the late 19th, early 20th century. I'm sorry, but that's not traditional hymnody. That's the beginning of the end. That's what's led us to where we are now, where it's rock bands in the church with words on the wall.
That's right.
It wasn't pop music exactly, but it was heading in that sappy, sentimental direction musically. But so there's teaching apart from learning how to read the music or understand it. Just you have to know the song. You have to know enough songs and learn to love to sing them. And that can be hard too. So, if I don't know this part of the background of your church, but, if many of them have a contemporary bent to what they listen to a lot or what they used to sing or Southern Baptist hymnody or those kinds of things, and you're trying to get them to sing Gudamel and Schutz and German Lutheran chorales and things like that, that can be tough.
Yes.
Not because it's that hard, but because it's different.
It's different.
It is a little harder in some regards, but more so it's just different. And then if you ask them to sing Erb stuff, it's not like anything. I mean, it's got roots and things. It's related to things, but the gestalt of that doesn't line up with anybody.
Right.
And so it's like, what? I have no category for that. And so again, so there's that side of teaching, and that's normal. Again, that's a literacy kind of thing. Your kids know stories before they know how to read.
Yes.
It's not like you start to have them read and they don't have any context or category for anything. They know the stories of the Bible already. They know, depending on what you read to them, there's children's stories, but there are stories that aren't children's stories that you tell at a children's level or not.
Yes.
You might have family time where if you read aloud Tolkien or Lewis, well, it's not for a 3-year-old, but the 3-year-old heard it when he was 3. He is aware of it, right? So knowing songs, that's probably a lot of what I would do, but I would start teaching literacy through that so they start to see. The easiest is rhythm. So I'll do this at a psalm sing. You start with a couple simple rhythm patterns that show up in a lot of songs, and I'll have them take songs they know. So if they know a song, they know how it goes. They know how the rhythm goes. They know how the melody goes.
Yes.
And I would spend a lot of time on melodies, not on parts. I've long called myself the anti-parts guy in the CREC.
Interesting.
Not because I'm opposed to parts,
Okay.
but so if you've got a bunch of guys who can't read music,
Yes.
I don't think they need to be learning all the bass parts to the songs.
Okay.
If you're going to spend that much time teaching them how every bass part goes, teach them to read music. This whole, teach them how to fish rather than give them fish. And I gotta say, as a music teacher, whether it's with college kids, younger kids, or adults, it's not a lot of fun, really, day after day, year after year, to keep giving a guy a fish.
Yes. Right.
That all the work then is on me.
Yes.
And they're doing nothing, and you're not, we talk in the classical world of recovering the tools of learning. We're not teaching anybody to learn. We're just subsidizing them,
Yes.
is what we're doing by having, again, I'm not opposed to these things. I'm really not. They can be nice additives that lead there. But if they lead to reading, and if they start keeping people from wanting to read, whether it's, you can listen to the bass part on the track or whatever, it might help you, but it might not. It might keep you I don't need to learn how to read because I can just listen to this thing 35 times before Sunday and I can kind of sing it, but probably many of them don't really sing it. They're grumbling something that's lower and they think they're singing a bass part. Teach them to sing well, teach them to read music, then they can sing any part.
Yes. So let me ask you this then, because my wife and I have this discussion a lot. Early on, I made 2 videos, and I was trying to teach the people how to read the music. And so looking at the notation, understanding how to just make sense of the notation. Her opinion was that was a little bit too much, and that it was going to be more difficult for them it was going to be too daunting of a task for them to try and learn how to read that, because it is learning another language. And so I put those up so that people could use them as a reference, and then we've been just trying to get them to understand the parts. So how would you really approach that then? So like what would be your priority for somebody that is, because we do have a lot of people that, we use the Sing Your Part app, and so they're listening to the bass line, they're trying to learn it that way, and I think they would be more prone to do that rather than watch the videos and really work on the notation.
Well, and again, I'm not opposed to that. That app, that program. But again, if it's in tandem with your, maybe this is as far as you get, but here's where we're aiming. And that's not the way to be training our kids up, is just learning everything by ear.
Right.
Spend the time and teach. It's not that hard if you have someone that knows how to do it. Again, even, so in a psalm sing, I want to spend some time on how to sing better.
Yes.
as best you can in a group of people that are varied. But the actual idea of you can try to sing better. You know, it's not like you were set in a cast at age 8 and like you can't ever sing any better the rest of your life. And yeah, improve your talent, please. So let's do it so it sounds better as best we can. And then again, I'm going to do simple literacy, but you can, you know, if you take "When I survey the wondrous cross," tu ta ta tu ta ta tu ta ta tu, or toe on the last note. But you name the rhythm, so they don't need to know it's a half note. They don't need to know it's a quarter note. They don't need to know that initially they don't need to know that a tu lasts twice as long as a ta.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
They know how it goes already. They can sing the melody.
Yes.
And you tell them what those symbols, we're going to call that symbol a tu and that a ta. Sing the melody, tu, ta. It might take them a time or two to get their brain used to thinking and looking, because they don't look at the notes, right? They only look at the words, but that's why I do it. It makes them look at the notes.
Interesting, yes.
And if you don't make them look at the notes, then by all means just put the words up on the screen.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
And that is, so historically, in America, a lot of once they started putting music in the songbooks, so the first book published in America was the Bay Psalm Psalter book.
Yes.
Only text, but it was psalm texts. That's the first thing we printed in our country. That ought to tell us something.
Yes.
Eventually, they start putting the music in, and at the beginning of many of the hymn Psalter books was a music theory textbook. Again, that's going to tell us something. There was a desire to teach. If you're going to put notes in a book, you need to know how to decipher those too, right? They're not there for decoration.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can't always have the song leader come around with you to every meeting or every time you sing in your family to teach the part or line it out. Now we have things like the app, so you kind of can carry around Dr. Erb in your pocket or the singing app teacher in your pocket. But again, that's, you know, as we talk about in the classical world, that's the equivalent of slavery. It's servile tutelage, right? You're not free to think independently, to learn on your own. You're dependent on somebody. So anyway, you used to have music theory texts in the hymnal. Now we don't have a hymnal. I mean, broadly speaking, in Western church life, we don't have hymnals at all, and we don't have the notes, right? We just have words. That's, as I describe it, I'll say this tomorrow too in the talk, but that's like a reversal of stained glass windowism, right? It's glorious, and it served its purpose, and it's still fine to have them, but one of the things stained glass windows did was remind people of the stories, and the only way they knew those stories because somebody told it to them, because they couldn't read it for themselves. The average person way back then didn't read. They didn't have a Bible, and if they had it, they couldn't read it. And so these were images that helped people that were illiterate. Well, then you get the translations during the Reformation, you get the printing press, but people still can't read. I mean, the rich, the aristocracy, they can read, but the average farmer, the average servant can't read. There's the need to teach the literacy. Or you need stained glass windows, or you need someone to line out every song or every part ever for you to learn something. And we've done the exact opposite musically in the church. We've taken it and we've just put word reminders up because nobody can read anyway, and we have no intention of teaching you. Right? So since you're illiterate, and because we don't think it's important to teach you, we'll just take it away.
Yes. I have two related questions for you. The first one is, one of the problems we have is getting people to sing out, just to sing loudly, so that we can actually hear them. Do you have any ways that you generally approach that with people that are timid in their singing?
Yeah, I'm like a football coach when I do stuff, and I just kind of tell them like it is, you know. That's, you know. But I get the reality. If you've been timid and haven't been trained and are bad at it, you can't just all of a sudden, you know. It's like, okay, you're physically timid, you're not strong, whatever, and you put someone on a football field and you say, okay, go tackle him. So it just doesn't happen like that. But you're equipping them, and so you do what you would do in a voice studio, but a little different because it's not someone who's seeking to take individual voice lessons. But you go at things. I'll do things that are speech-like. So I'll. People don't like to do something new or different or weird, and to make progress with singing, you have to be able to do things that are different and weird, not the norm. So Americans, we talk like this, low and gravelly with hardly any air going through our chords, and that's why it sounds gravelly, because we're so lazy when it comes to speaking. We're mumblers, we're gravel speakers.
That's so true.
And then you have a high British sound, which is very spacious, and that's good singing, because you're awakening your instrument to be used well, but we don't. We speak like this. Our instrument's been shut down.
Wow.
Or then there's the Italianos. They speak like this, and they sing, I love to sing, oh, sol mio. And they sing music. They speak musically.
Yeah.
They speak with a ring. They're speaking well. So we talk about truth, goodness, and beauty.
Yeah.
We could apply that to speech. We do not speak well.
Wow.
We don't speak beautifully. We don't speak good. Right? I don't know about true, but I suppose technique-wise, no.
Right.
We're just bad speakers. Mm-hmm. So if you've grown up not singing or not singing well, and you speak badly, and then you want to go, a mighty fortress is. That's like asking to jump the Grand Canyon.
Right. Yes.
They have no idea how to phonate like that. And then you get the guys that will try, and it's like they're carrying, 10, 50-pound bags of luggage up the stairs. Almighty for... It's like, oh, stop, please. That's not what the Lord meant when he said make a joyful shout to the Lord. I'm pretty sure of it. Singing well is shout-like. You're using the anatomy of shouting. Ha, 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 ha.
Yes.
Ha, ha, ha. Shouting on a football field, okay. No one wants to hear that in church.
Right.
And
maybe that gets to the next question then, which is listening. Because we found that right now our community is getting to the point where they have a collection of songs that they know pretty well, and they're getting more comfortable singing them. And so they're starting to sing them out a little bit. But now the next stage is just getting them to listen to other people without that messing them up.
Yeah. Well, and that too, pedagogically, can be a reason to not do too many parts too early. Because people, their ears are weak.
Yes.
And so they can't, the minute someone else sings another part, they're lost. Or they can only sing the part when they're standing next to you.
Right.
And so what, again, I'm not against parts. I want us to sing parts robustly, but I want us to be equipped to actually do it.
Yes.
And not have this House of Cards version of we sing parts, but nobody can read or write their name. That's like, I don't know how true this is, but the narrative of a lot of the Shakespearean actors couldn't read and write. They seem like they're eloquent and they're doing something rhetorical or oratorical, but they can't read and write their name. There's a problem there.
So would you then, you're going to focus on the melody, so everybody's together, and then you're going to try and draw out things that they already know and are doing about that melody, so then they can at least identify them, call them something, and then apply that to something else. Is that about right?
Yeah. And then, you can get to, you do things that are canons. There's not a lot of canons for church. A lot of people sing my 134. And so you're doing a part, but for a lot of people, doing the same melody at a different time is confusing for them.
Yes.
There are a lot of people that will stumble with that until they've done it enough. Obviously, if you do a fuguing tune, you have to sing a part because there is no one melody through that portion of the song.
Yes.
So either you need to be able to teach parts or you don't choose to do fuguing tunes. But again, if you're doing things in any sense of a systematic pedagogical way, you don't want to start with a lot of the hard stuff if they can't do even the most simple stuff. If they can't sing parts on When I Survey the Wondrous Cross confidently, why are you doing a fuguing tune? Why are you doing parts on Schutz or Gudemel? And of course, historically in the church, there's very few places where part singing was part of the experience. Everyone sang melody. Even in the Lutheran world, where they valued music and they had glorious music by the organ or the choir, when it was time to sing the hymn with the whole congregation, as I understand it, it wasn't accompanied even. There was sometimes organ between the lines of the hymn, but they sang in unison without accompaniment when it was time to sing. There's not the encouragement where the parts existed was to sing it at home, around your table.
Yes,
Well, of course, that means you had to be able to read the music with your voice or pull out your viol or your recorder, flute, whatever, and you would do the part stuff at home and more complicated versions than we have in our hymnals. But yeah, I would start with that. The other thing that happens, again, particularly with an unskilled group of singers, is, so let's say everybody sings the melody to A Mighty Fortress or whatever the song is on verse 1. It's, if they're trying, it'll sound fairly hearty. And then on verse 2, everyone that can or can't or shouldn't goes to a part. The music tends to slow down. The range for the alto and the bass is really low, so you cannot phonate as strongly in those registers. You may be more comfortable, but you can't phonate. So at that point, you're not lifting up a strong song. Everyone may be enjoying singing the parts or pretending they're singing the parts, as the case may be. But the result of the sound in the sanctuary is greatly weakened. Now, if you have good singers who can do the parts and they're in ranges that are able to sing and you've got enough in acoustic, it can still sound strong because of the way the tones work together and support one another. But if not, it diffuses, dilutes the strength of the corporate singing. I would submit, if you're not skilled to do it.
Yes. Yeah, you're talking about real musical literacy. And I think that the tendency, and we have fallen into the same tendency, is to fall into that pragmatic approach to it where you're just trying to get people to sing in their range and their part. But that's not really going to ultimately solve the problem. Now, one thing that we have done is we did start with a lot of difficult ones because we wanted to just get people doing them. And I was thinking about it this way before I was thinking in the way you're presenting this, that if they can think of their part as the melody, then whenever we're singing it together, they would be able to do it. And that has worked in some cases with the fuguing tunes, but generally they're going to be relying on the stronger singers and then just follow them.
Yeah, fuguing tune is easier in that the different parts do have a sense of melody. But in most hymns, they don't have a sense of melody. They're subservient. And again, pedagogically, I would say, if someone's singing the alto part but they don't know the melody, then they have no business singing the alto part. Because the only reason the alto part exists is to support and glorify the melody. It would be like knowing some kind of deep weeds eschatology stuff, but you don't know that God is a triune God and that Jesus is love. You don't know the basic theme. You need to know the basic themes and then support it. So
I appreciate that. Well, so then this will be a good segue into your music. So most of the Reformed people in my circles know who you are because of Psalm 134. We sing Psalm 134, we sing Psalm 117, and then we just introduced Psalm 14.
114? 14, yeah.
Yeah, to Psalm 14 ends with the canon,
yeah,
which is so glorious.
Which I didn't write that.
Okay, well, so maybe you can tell us a little bit about the Psalter and then like what your approach to that was.
Yeah, so when I took that first job in the Seattle church, I had sung a few metric psalms, but probably didn't think of them as psalms. So all people that on earth to dwell, or I guess you knew Psalm 23 was Psalm 23, but it was just in the hymnal.
Yes.
You didn't think of it as psalms, really. Right. So I started learning metric psalms because that was what they were doing, and enjoying them and thankful for that. And then I came to the point where, I think, well, but I want to sing the real version of the psalm out of the Bible. Now, I know it's a translation into English, but if you were to count the King James or the New King James as more or less a faithful translation from the original language, which is not putting it into rhyme and meter, the parallelism still exists, the structures of chiasm and things exist. You lose acrostics, but it's close. I want to sing that. So, one of the favorites is as the heart about to falter in its trembling agony. The Bible says nothing about the trembling agony of the deer. That's filler. It's exegesis. I have no problem with it, but that's not Psalm 42 from the Bible. That's right. Yeah. And if we call it Psalm 42, we're not being clear, truthful, really, if you will. And so I would get where if I say that, I would try to say, we'll be singing the metric version of Psalm 42, or call it by the name, but not 42. Right. It's not. And so at any rate, it got me thinking, oh, I'd like to sing that text. But there was, other than chanting, which I like very much, and I'm more of a proponent of Roman psalm tone chanting than I am of Anglican chanting, which is really an offshoot of it. I don't dislike Anglican chant, but that's where I would default to. But other than chanting, there's no settings of the text straight up for congregation in the history of the church. And that, I mean, I knew that because I'd had the training. So this is tying back to, my training equipped me to know the music of the church by and large, because when you study music in the West, you're studying the music of the church until post Bach, generally. So I knew that, but there's nothing there. You can't find a setting of Psalm 100, Psalm 1, Psalm anything that's written out, that's not metrified.
That's right.
So it got transformed into a different kind of genre of poetry. So I just tried. I don't think of myself as that creative, really, in that sense, and I don't think of myself as a composer, although I compose and arrange some things, and I've written these songs. But and I think it was a blessing that I wasn't more of a composer, because if I did, I'd want to be doing more complicated things for choirs, and not what I did with the Psalm Project. So I started with the shortest ones because, again, there was no real model for it, and so the process I go through. I haven't written one in a while now, but is I'd select a song I thought I might want to set, and I'd write out the text by hand, so I'm physically interacting with it. I'd read it aloud to get a sense of how it goes. So, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament, and I'd underline where stresses are in the text, and then I'd analyze it for structure of the whole psalm itself. I might use other aids that lead me to things I might miss. And so, okay, this Psalm 100 is a clear A, B in its ideas. And so that might give you some ideas how you might want to do musical things to reflect the structure in the Psalm. Probably the number one influence on my writing would be chant. So I'm in the word itself. And so my setting of Psalm 19, which is one of the earlier ones in the long one, is in 7/8. Well, I didn't purpose to write in 7/8 meter, asymmetric, unusual meter. But the text was, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. That's kind of the way the scansion of the stresses of the text fell out. And so I'm not doing it to be kitschy or hip or or difficult, and that's what chant does. Chant organizes; it's reflecting text stress, and so it will group things in groups of 2 or 3. Da 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 da. It's not trying to be, funky. It's just those are where the stresses are. So it's chant-like in that sense. Sometimes I use chant tones. I'll put them in my music specifically. Sometimes I write things that are a la chant tones. Some things have nothing to do with chant. But the idea of it being text-driven as opposed to just put in a rhyme and meter and and that's what happens with the rhyme things. The Scottish Psalter songs are da 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 da. They're almost all the same rhythm, right? So the text gets forced into these meters, and I wasn't doing that when I wrote them. And then, of course, I'd say them aloud, and musical ideas would come. And then it was a lot like sculpting, because that works here, but if that music's going to repeat itself down here because there's a textual idea that comes back, this only has 7 syllables, but this has 11 syllables. And so now I need to get that melody to fit here, and sometimes I have to compose backwards to get these to fit. And so there will be melodies that you'll find in many of my songs. There's more frequently groups of 2 or 3 notes per syllable sometimes, which is unusual to a hymnal. Most hymns are syllabic, other than things like "Lo," and everyone loves that, but that's rare. It doesn't happen very often. That happens more in my music at a smaller level. It was a necessity, really, if I was going to compose in the way I did. And So yeah, it's speech driven. There's chant influences. There's folk and hymn influences. Sometimes I quote things. So Luther's 46, they call A Mighty Fortress. They call Luther's 46. Well, it's based on Psalm 46, and then it is very different from Psalm 46.
Yes.
It's not a metric paraphrase at all. It's just based on ideas in it. So I quoted parts of Luther's tune in my 46. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. And then I wrote stuff, the music changes from C major to C minor because the text changes greatly. Therefore we shall not fear, even though the earth be removed. And then later on it changes again, it goes back to major, and I quote, there is a river whose streams, and it's quoting Luther. I've got whole songs that are Mussorgsky, and I've texted over, or Heller. I've used classical music. The Psalm 13, Corelli. So there's a lot of different ways I've gone at it. So classical chants, hymnody, even folk hymnody in some cases are all influences. And I'll often say, those are streams. Those are historic streams for the church, generally speaking, and those are streams I'm standing in. And so, if somebody writes contemporary Christian music, they're a musician, they become a Christian, they grow up in it, and that's all they know. I can't fault them for doing the only thing they know how to do. That's the only stream they stand in, musically speaking. Yes. And so when they go to be creative and they deal with any text, whether it's the Psalms or whether it's a hymn or whatever it happens to be, they're going to write in that style. It's what they know.
Yes.
The deal is you need to know other things. The church has a heritage, the church has a history, and it's not that you can only write in one style or another, but that's where it's important in training up our kids, our communities, to know that.
Yes.
And that is hard. If they listen to contemporary Christian radio all day, or whatever the version of that is now, and then you want them to do other stuff, and they have no point of connection to it, it is like listening to Russian.
Yes. But one of the things that my wife and I really appreciate about your settings is all those allusions do give it a sense of connectedness. And it's that just is such an enriching thing. But because of what you're saying then, how would you envision your Psalms being used and accessible to the church generally?
Well, I teach the freshmen as part of the oral skills class. They have to learn 4 of my Psalms every term. We have a 4-term system. So at the end of the freshman year, they've memorized 16 chapters of the Bible minimum. Wow, yes. And most of them learn, and I don't include 117 or 134 in that group. Yes. And they have extra credit options, so they could do more, but at least 16 chapters. And I should stop saying this, it probably becomes a pride thing, but they don't learn 16 chapters of the Bible in their theology class by memory. Mm-hmm. They don't learn it anywhere else. Mm-hmm. I don't think most people anywhere have 16 chapters of the Bible memorized. Right. And if they're in the honors program and continue in the second year, they do 16 more. And so 32 chapters of the Bible in 2 years. And I've taught them at music camp. They're not as hard to learn as people think they are. Right. And the nice thing is there's music now, there's a piano edition and the vocal edition, but they've all been recorded on all the streaming devices, and you can just listen to them. And so most people don't read music, so listen to them. And because they're so uniquely tied to the text, they're fairly easy to learn in that sense. Yes. It really is harder to memorize 6 verses of a hymn where it's the same melody for all the verses. You get lost, you conflate things. Yes. And I know, I've done it with my kids. I know other, generally former students, who do it with their young kids, and it's just part of their singing at bedtime, this and that, and they're learning all these songs. It's not hard for them to learn. Yes. They just listen to them. They might work on them a bit, but we learn all sorts of stuff. Yes. Yes. Not all pop music is easy to learn, actually. That's right. Rhythmically, especially. That is right. Sometimes melodically. Sometimes there is no melody to learn. But they're not as hard. They're just different. So, and I intended them for worship. And some of them are short, right? If you read Psalm 134, you read Psalm 117, it doesn't take you very long. Right. It's not a praise worship chorus. We're not going to sing it 4 times, 7 times in a row, right? Yes. Just because it's short. That's it. And one of the things I found as I started writing them is when I write in this way, it takes way less time to sing through these psalms than it does to do metric paraphrase of them, like 2 or 3 times as long. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that per se, but as you start working through a service, it adds up and it takes time, and you lose things in translation. But that's one of the reasons I wrote it, was to have, it's in response to Colossians 3:16, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. You unpack that, and that would blow your mind, right? Wait, yeah, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly. Check, yeah, we should do that. Why? So that you can teach and admonish one another. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. In psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, which would imply singing, right? Because they are sung things. Wait, we're supposed to teach and admonish in singing? And singing the Psalms particularly, which I'm not a theologian, but enough guys that I trust would suggest that Psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, all of that refers to the Psalter. There are different headings found in the Psalter, not the Psalms, hymns, holy, 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 and spiritual songs, shine, Jesus, shine. We don't read that through our own
That's right. That's exactly
idea.
right.
So it was doing that so that the word's in us, and you have it, it's memorized.
Yes.
And I hear that from so many people that have learned, whether it's a couple of my psalms or 20 of my psalms, is that they'll be in church and the pastor starts reading something and they're singing along, just like someone does with songs from Messiah, right? Somebody reads a passage and they've heard Messiah enough, and that's playing along. Well, if you can kind of have Messiah playing along in your head, you can have my songs playing along in your head, because they're simpler.
Wonderful Counselor, Almighty God, you're sort of singing that.
And it's meant to be that. So it's a memory tool, not just a memory tool, but God is, there's something about music, the way God's done it, that it has that sticky quality. There's studies done of Alzheimer's patients who don't recognize their children, and they can sing all these songs that they've known all their life. The music helps it stick.
It has been that way for me. I mean, when I did my presbytery examination, learning the Psalms, I was using your Psalm settings for that. Psalm 14, Psalm 137, those are 2 of my favorite ones. And you just remember the text that much easier.
Yeah. It's hard for me to say them, actually.
Yes,
it's like I need to sing them.
Exactly. Well, that's how I am with the Apostles' Creed now, because I would rather just sing it.
Yeah.
That's super insightful. One last question on that, and then we can bring it to a close here. But would you say that an approach to learning your psalm settings then could be just to simply read the text, because that will put the meter in a sense in the way that it will be set?
Yeah, certainly. If you're listening to the recording, you could just pull out. Most of them are New King James. There are a few King James. When I started, I hadn't settled that I was going to do a big project, but you just pull your Bible out and listen to it, and there's the text.
Yes. And so then you just, because the way that you were writing it, it sounds like you were reading it first. You were figuring out how the meter was going to fall based on the text, and then you're kind of working the music around that. And so if you get a sense of what the meter is just by reading it, then the music, because it looks a little daunting on the page whenever people look at it. They're like, they see 7/8 and they lose their minds. So just reading the text kind of makes sense of that a little bit.
Yeah, and a lot of those songs, I wouldn't use for music reading, because they are more complicated in that sense. Learn them by ear. There's nothing wrong with learning music orally, particularly if you don't have the reading skills. But even if you do have some reading skills, or you have reading skills at the piano, maybe a lot of pianists struggle with it too. They can play Mozart, they can play a hymn, and they really have trouble with mine, particularly before there were piano parts written out. And I have that same trouble. I don't do that well at all.
There are piano parts written out now?
Yeah, there's a piano. I can show it to you later.
Oh, I didn't know. Okay.
There's a piano edition where I've realized all the piano parts.
Okay, yeah.
Thanks to my wife, continues saying, you need to do this. Yeah, I know, but I don't want to. It's just a lot of work. I don't want to do that.
Yes.
And anyway, that exists now. But I don't play by ear or through chord charts well, because I never developed that skill. But I wrote them. I know what I want, so I could do it. But it's really hard for a lot of people. I get that.
Yes.
But yeah, I learn them by ear, learn them by rote.
That's super helpful.
No problem with that.
So if for people that want to follow you, follow your work, support what you're doing, how would they do that?
I mean, the one encouragement, I mean, it's not so much me, but I'm tied to it, is listen to the Psalms, buy a copy of them if you want to look at it. Even if you don't read music, if you're looking at it, it's a way that helps you learn to read music if you actually look at it, at the music. Kids, one of the reasons kids can read so easily, generally, is they've been looking at the books for 5 years. When you sit them down in your lap and you read the story to them, all the words are there.
That's right.
And eventually you might start doing this, and they don't know that that's a bee yet, but they've seen it, and they've seen it when you've said it, and there are things that just the brain's ready to receive when you start instructing.
Yes.
So, but a book aside, listen to the Psalms and learn God's word, and sing it. That's what He calls us to do. That's the main thing. For those that are doing other stuff, one of my former students and now colleague, Joshua Roberts at Trinity Reformed Church in Moscow, we're starting a music publishing company. We're trying to get it off the ground.
Okay.
Initially be choral music, and it'll grow to have other things, God willing, but trying to serve the church, particularly in school communities, and have stuff that would be tied to church music instrumentally and different things. There's nothing to see yet. The site exists, but there's very little to see yet. But you can be looking for that. It's called Pretorius Publications. Pretorius is one of the most prolific, important Lutheran composers in our heritage. And he wrote on music, not just writing music, but he does a lot of compendium writing.
Okay, and you run the music program in the summertime.
Yeah, there's a number of things depending on. We do this K-12 music camp in July in Moscow, and I do one in Monroe, West Monroe, Louisiana. And there's the high school honor choir that we do in tandem with the ACCS, which is an audition thing that's on the website. And if there are high schoolers that are more advanced in singing and want that kind of opportunity, they can audition for that. And what else? The Chenaniah Summer Music Institute, which is for post-high school students that have some level of collegiate instruction, whether it's at college or not, but they're functioning at a little higher level musically. That's 2 weeks long, 3 summers long to get the certification over that. So it's a big investment, and it's really intense. But you talk to anyone who's done it, they wouldn't trade it. I mean, it's just transforms the way they think about teaching music in a classroom setting, and that is. I mean, there's a lot of stuff we're doing at NSA and in Moscow to be working towards this literacy for all the saints at different levels. But there's the need to have teachers who can do it, and that's going in that direction. When I'm going to circle back on something you had asked about music and rhetoric. I think it was 2011. I was asked to give a talk at the ACCS conference in Atlanta. I think that's the right year. And they wanted me to talk on music and rhetoric because I teach at the college level. And I'm like, you really want me to do that? I don't think the ACCS is really ready to deal with musical rhetoric. I don't think we're doing grammar level stuff very well, broadly speaking. And like, no, that's what you do, talk about it. I said, okay. So it was high octane, black coffee rhetoric. This is what real rhetorical music is and how it's composed and how one thinks about it. But the ending was, in order to get there, you have to be doing grammar and dialectic.
That's right.
And then I talked about could I. Well, there was a young music teacher, had a master's in music from that church and school in Monroe, who was there. And that summer he started getting his could I training because I didn't have our program set up. He became certified, and now he's one of our. He has his own program, which is great, and he teaches for us and kind of leads the charge on that. But it had that effect to be training up teachers to be training to that end. So that's a program that's worth considering for people who are teaching, and it's. We have such a wide range. There are people who have master's degrees who come, and then there's moms who played piano growing up and maybe sang in choir. They're not super high level musicians, but they know enough, and they come and they might struggle with some of the stuff we do because we also are training them as in their musicianship, not just here's how to teach a 5-year-old.
Right.
But they're better equipped. Maybe they're not going to be as strong a teacher as someone who's got a master's. Maybe they'll be better in some cases.
Right.
But they're better equipped to. And I see that transformation throughout the ACCS as we have more and more teachers coming to receive this different means of training and just wanting to train well.
Yes.
Again, so many schools, they might have music, but it's music time with Mrs. Smith. It's a bad choir. It's not done well. There's no real purpose. There's no strong curriculum like you'll have in your math or your Latin or your theology. It's just music time, and it's not done well, and no one knows what to do, and nobody cares, to be honest. And it sounds sad to say, but it has to be that, or it would be different.
Yes. That's right.
So anyway, those are some things people can look at. I don't know if I forgot anything there. But.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for coming on with me. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Nice
thanks
to meet
for
you.
having me. It was a pleasure.